Close your eyes and imagine standing at the edge of humanity's oldest mystery, a secret written in clay over 6,000 years ago. A story so extraordinary that it threatens to rewrite everything we thought we knew about our origins, our purpose, and our place in the cosmos. This is not simply ancient mythology. This is the story of Nibiru, the phantom planet that haunts our solar system. This is the saga of the Anunnaki, beings who the ancients claimed descended from the heavens to shape the destiny of our world. And this is the question that refuses to die. Are we alone in the universe, or were we never alone to begin with? Before we journey into the depths of this ancient enigma, ignite that like button and prepare for the revelations to come. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from, what time it is there. And as always with our videos, the visuals are here to add context, but they aren't necessary to follow along. Thank you for always having our back. Prepare yourself and let's dive in. The story begins not in the distant past, but in the 20th century, in the mind of man who would change how millions of people viewed human history forever. His name was Zecharia Sitchin, and he was born in the Soviet Union in 1920, raised in Palestine, and educated in London. He was not an archaeologist or a linguist by formal training. His academic background was in economics and journalism. But what Sitchin possessed was an unshakable conviction that the ancient texts of Mesopotamia contained not myth, but history. Literal, factual accounts of extraterrestrial intervention in human affairs. In 1976, Sitchin published a book that would ignite one of the most enduring and controversial theories in modern alternative history. The book was called The 12th Planet, and its central claim was audacious to the point of being revolutionary. According to Sitchin's unique interpretation of Sumerian cuneiform tablets, our solar system contains a hidden member, a massive planet on an enormous elliptical orbit that brings it through the inner solar system once every 3,600 years. He called this planet Nibiru, adopting a term from ancient Mesopotamian astronomy. And according to Sitchin, this planet was home to an advanced humanoid species called the Anunnaki, beings who came to Earth roughly 450,000 years ago with a desperate mission. Sitchin's narrative was nothing if not comprehensive. He claimed that Nibiru's atmosphere was eroding, threatening the survival of everyone on the planet. The Anunnaki scientists determined that the only solution was to create a protective shield in their stratosphere by suspending fine particles of gold in the air, which would reflect heat and light back to the surface. But Nibiru lacked sufficient gold reserves. So when the planet's orbit brought it close to Earth, the Anunnaki launched an expedition to our world, which their astronomical observations had revealed to be rich in the precious metal they desperately needed. The Anunnaki established bases in what would later become ancient Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They set up mining operations, primarily in southeastern Africa, and for thousands of years, the rank-and-file Anunnaki workers toiled in these mines, extracting gold to be shipped back to their home world. But the work was brutal, dangerous, and endless. Around 300,000 years ago, according to Sitchin's timeline, the miners could take no more. They mutinied, refusing to work any longer. This is where Sitchin's theory takes its most controversial turn. Faced with a labour crisis, the Anunnaki chief scientist, a being named Enki, proposed a radical solution. Using their advanced knowledge of genetics, the Anunnaki would create a worker species by taking a primitive hominid, already evolving on Earth, what we would call Homo erectus, and genetically enhancing it with Anunnaki DNA. The result of this bioengineering project was Homo sapiens, us. We were made, Sitchin declared, to be slaves, designed specifically to toil in the gold mines for our alien masters. In Sitchin's interpretation, the biblical story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden was not a metaphor for the fall of man, but a distorted memory of our genetic creation in an Anunnaki laboratory. The Sumerian myths of gods creating humanity from clay became, in his reading, ancient technical descriptions of genetic manipulation. The divine spark that supposedly makes humanity special was simply Anunnaki DNA grafted onto a terrestrial primate. Sitchin wove an intricate tapestry connecting dozens of ancient myths to this core narrative. The Great Flood described in countless cultures around the world was, in his view, not divine punishment, but a natural cataclysm caused by the gravitational effects of Nibiru's passage through the inner solar system. The Anunnaki leader Enlil wanted to use this opportunity to wipe out the noisy, troublesome human workforce, but his half-brother Enki, who had played the role of humanity's creator and benefactor, secretly warned a human named Zusudra, known in the Bible as Noah, to build an ark and preserve human and animal life. The ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia, those massive stepped pyramids that dominated the landscape of Sumerian cities, were not simply temples in Sitchin's interpretation. They were landing platforms or refueling stations for the Anunnaki's spacecraft. The myths of gods descending from the heavens were literal accounts of extraterrestrial beings arriving in technological vehicles that the ancient witnesses could only describe using the vocabulary available to them. Shining chariots, celestial boats, divine fire. Sitchin's theory provided answers to questions that have puzzled historians for generations. Why did civilization seem to appear so suddenly in Sumer around 6,000 years ago? Because the Anunnaki gave humanity the gift of agriculture, writing, mathematics, and urban planning. How did the Sumerians possess such sophisticated astronomical knowledge, including awareness of planets invisible to the naked eye? Because the Anunnaki told them. Every mystery of the ancient world, from the construction of megaliths to the origin of religion itself, could be explained by this single unified narrative of ancient astronauts. The academic world's response to Sitchin's work was swift and overwhelmingly negative. Scholars who specialized in ancient Mesopotamian languages, Assyriologists and Sumerologists, systematically dismantled his translations. They argued that Sitchin manipulated definitions, took words wildly out of context, and imposed modern technological interpretations onto ancient spiritual and mythological texts. The word Anunnaki, they pointed out, simply meant princely offspring or those of royal blood, referring to the children of the sky god Anu. It had nothing to do with space travellers. There was no ancient text that explicitly stated humanity was created by aliens to mine gold. These were all conclusions Sitchin had stitched together from disparate and allegorical sources. Astronomers were equally dismissive. A planet with the orbital characteristics Sitchin described, travelling in a highly elliptical path that takes it from the outer reaches of the solar system through the inner planets every 3,600 years, would be dynamically unstable. Its gravitational influence would create massive, easily detectable perturbations in the orbits of the known planets. No such perturbations have been observed. Furthermore, if such a planet existed and passed through the inner solar system with any regularity, it would have been spotted by modern astronomical surveys. Despite this universal rejection by mainstream academia, Sitchin's ideas flourished in popular culture. His books sold millions of copies worldwide and were translated into more than 25 languages. He inspired a global movement of believers who saw in his work not pseudoscience, but the suppressed truth that establishment academics were either too blind or too frightened to acknowledge. Sitchin's narrative fed into a growing cultural distrust of authority, providing a story that was simultaneously scientific and mythic, grounding ancient religious texts in what appeared to be concrete physical reality. But to truly understand the power and persistence of the Nibiru myth, we must go beyond Sitchin. We must travel back to the source itself, to the land between two rivers, to the place where human civilization first learned to write, to calculate, to build cities that would stand for millennia. We must go to ancient Sumer. Imagine standing in the pre-dawn darkness of southern Mesopotamia 6,000 years ago. The air is cool and still, carrying the earthy scent of the Euphrates River, and the distant bleating of goats settling for the night. Before you rises the unmistakable silhouette of a ziggurat, a massive stepped pyramid of mud brick that dominates the landscape like an artificial mountain. This is Sumer, the world's first civilization, the place where everything we associate with urban society, writing, law, organised religion, monumental architecture, was born. The Sumerians were, by any measure, extraordinary. They invented cuneiform, one of the earliest known systems of writing, using wedge-shaped marks pressed into wet clay tablets. They developed sophisticated mathematics based on a sexagesimal system, counting in units of 60, a legacy we still honour every time we measure an hour as 60 minutes, or a circle as 360 degrees. They were master astronomers who mapped the night sky with remarkable precision, tracking the movements of planets and stars with an accuracy that wouldn't be surpassed for thousands of years. But it was their mythology, their stories of the gods, that would provide the raw material for Sitchin's theories and countless others that followed. The Sumerians worshipped a pantheon of deities they called the Anunnaki, and these gods were not distant, abstract forces. They were personalities, They had names, relationships, rivalries, and very specific roles in the cosmic order. They demanded worship, received offerings, and according to the myths, they had created humanity for a very particular purpose. The word Anunnaki itself is fascinating. In the Sumerian language, it's generally translated as princely offspring or those of royal blood, indicating their status as the children of An, the supreme sky god, and Ki, the earth goddess. The earliest references to the Anunnaki appear in texts from the late 3rd millennium BCE, describing them as the most powerful deities in the Mesopotamian pantheon. They were not a tightly defined group with a fixed membership. Different texts from different periods included different gods under the Anunnaki umbrella, but certain names appear consistently. At the apex of the divine hierarchy stood An, known in the Akkadian language as Anu, the god of the heavens. He was the distant patriarch, the ultimate authority who rarely intervened directly in earthly affairs, but whose will was absolute. Below him were 2 of his sons, half-brothers, who would play central roles in virtually every significant myth. Enlil, the god of air, wind, and storms, was the executive of the pantheon, the enforcer of divine law. He was powerful, often stern, and not particularly patient with the lesser beings under his authority. The city of Nippur, with its great temple complex, was considered Enlil's earthly residence, and became the religious heart of Sumer. Enlil's half-brother was Enki, known in Akkadian as Ea, the god of fresh water, wisdom, magic, and creation. Where Enlil represented authority and order, Enki represented creativity and cleverness. He was the master craftsman, the inventor, the problem solver. His domain was the Abzu, the subterranean ocean of fresh water that the Sumerians believed existed beneath the earth. Enki was consistently portrayed in myths as more sympathetic to humanity, often finding ways to help or protect mortals, even when it meant circumventing the harsher decrees of his brother Enlil. The relationship between these 2 brothers, Enlil and Enki, forms the dramatic engine that drives much of Sumerian mythology. It's a relationship defined by fundamental philosophical differences. Enlil demands order, hierarchy, obedience. He becomes irritated by noise, by chaos, by things that disrupt his peace. Enki, by contrast, is flexible, inventive, willing to break rules to achieve what he sees as a greater good. Time and again in the myths, Enlil will decree something harsh, and Enki will find a clever workaround to mitigate the damage. This tension reaches its climax in one of the most important texts in all of Mesopotamian literature, the Atrahasis epic, a creation story that dates to the Old Babylonian period around 1800 BCE, but draws on much older Sumerian sources. The Atrahasis tells a story that is simultaneously a creation myth, a flood narrative, and a meditation on the relationship between gods and humans. According to the Atrahasis, in the beginning the work of maintaining the world, digging rivers, dredging canals, building the infrastructure of the cosmos, was performed not by humans but by the junior gods, a group called the Agigi. For thousands of years these lesser deities toiled at the command of the senior Anunnaki. But eventually the Agigi reached their breaking point. They burned their tools, surrounded Enlil's temple, and went on strike, refusing to work any longer. Enlil was furious and wanted to punish the rebels severely, but Enki, ever the problem solver, proposed an alternative. Rather than punishing the Agigi, the gods should create a new being specifically designed to take over the heavy labour. This being would be formed by mixing clay, the substance of the earth itself, with something divine, and here the myth becomes very specific in a way that has fascinated and troubled scholars for generations. A god named Geshtu-e, described as having intelligence, was selected to be sacrificed. His blood and his essence were mixed with clay, and this mixture was given to Nintu, the mother goddess, a specialist in matters of creation. She divided the clay into 14 portions, 7 to create males and 7 to create females. These portions were then implanted into the wombs of 14 birth goddesses who served as surrogate mothers. After a gestation period, the first humans were born. The purpose of human existence in this telling was explicit and uncomfortably clear. Humans were created to free the gods from menial labour. We were not made in love. We were made as a practical solution to a labour dispute. Our divine spark, the thing that supposedly elevates us above other animals, was quite literally the blood of a sacrificed god, binding us forever to servitude. This is not the uplifting creation story of Genesis, where humanity is made in God's image and given dominion over the earth. This is a story of utility. We exist because the gods needed workers, and according to the myths, this fundamental relationship between humanity as servants and the gods as masters defined ancient Mesopotamian religion. The temples were not just places of worship, they were the literal houses of the gods, maintained by human priests who acted as the gods' servants, providing them with food, clothing and care. But even accepting the myths as they were intended, as religious allegories explaining the human condition, there remain puzzling elements that have fueled centuries of speculation. The Sumerians possessed knowledge that seems, on the surface, impossible for their time. They had detailed astronomical records. They tracked the movements of planets across the sky with precision. Some of their astronomical texts mention celestial bodies that shouldn't have been visible to the naked eye. This brings us to the heart of the mystery, to the word that Sitchin seized upon and made the centerpiece of his theory, Nibiru. To understand what Nibiru actually meant to the ancient Mesopotamians, we must turn to the texts themselves, particularly to the Babylonian creation epic known as the Enuma Elish. The Enuma Elish, whose title means when on high, was composed sometime in the late 2nd millennium BCE, though it draws on earlier Sumerian traditions. It's a cosmogonic myth, a story about how the universe came to be ordered, but it's also a political document, a piece of propaganda designed to justify the supremacy of Babylon and its patron god Marduk over the older Sumerian cities and their deities. The epic begins in the primordial void before the heavens had been named or the earth had been formed. There existed only two beings, Apsu, the embodiment of fresh water, and Tiamat, the embodiment of salt water. These two primordial forces mingled, and from their union, the first generation of gods was born. These young gods were noisy and energetic, and their constant activity disturbed Apsu, who decided to destroy them so he could have peace. But Ea, the clever god of wisdom, discovered the plot. He cast a spell that put Apsu to sleep, then killed him and built his palace over Apsu's watery corpse. Ea and his wife Damkina then gave birth to Marduk, who is described in almost superhuman terms. He had 4 eyes that could see everything, 4 ears that could hear everything, and fire blazed from his mouth when he spoke. Marduk's grandfather, the sky god Anu, was so impressed with the child that he gave him the 4 winds to play with as toys. But Marduk's play stirred up the waters, and this noise enraged Tiamat, who had remained passive after Apsu's death. The other gods came to her and complained about how Ea had killed her husband, and they urged her to take revenge. Tiamat agreed. She created an army of monsters, dragons, demons, and other terrifying beings, and placed them under the command of her new consort, a god named Kingu, to whom she gave the Tablets of Destiny, objects that granted supreme authority over the cosmos. The younger gods were paralyzed with fear. Neither Ea nor Anu was willing to face Tiamat's monstrous army. Finally, Marduk stepped forward and offered to be their champion, but he demanded a price. If he defeated Tiamat, he must be made king of all the gods, with absolute and eternal authority. The desperate gods agreed. Marduk armed himself with a bow, a club, lightning, and the 4 winds, and he rode into battle on a storm chariot. When he confronted Tiamat, she opened her mouth to devour him, but Marduk sent the evil wind into her throat, inflating her body like a balloon. While she was helpless, he shot an arrow into her heart, killing her. He captured her monstrous army and took the Tablets of Destiny from Kingu. Then Marduk performed his greatest act. He took Tiamat's enormous corpse and split it in 2 like a shellfish. From one half he raised the sky, creating the heavens. From the other half he formed the earth. He set the stars in their proper stations, created the calendar, established the movements of the sun and moon, and imposed order on the cosmos. He had not simply won a war. He had created reality itself from the body of chaos. And it is here, in this moment of cosmic organization, that we encounter Nibiru. After establishing the heavens and earth, Marduk set up celestial stations for the gods. The Enuma Elish states that he established the station of Nibiru to determine their celestial bands so that none might transgress or fall short. In this context, Nibiru is not a rogue planet. It is the opposite. It is a fixed point, a celestial anchor, the centre around which everything else revolves. Its function is to maintain order, to keep the other heavenly bodies in their proper courses. Later astronomical texts from Babylon provide more specific information. The MUL.APN, a comprehensive star catalogue compiled around 1000 BCE, identifies Nibiru as a celestial body associated with Marduk that marks seasonal transitions. It describes Nibiru as standing in a specific position in the sky at the vernal equinox, the point where the sun crosses the celestial equator. This is not describing a planet that disappears for thousands of years. This is describing the predictable annual behaviour of a known object. The scholarly consensus, based on extensive analysis of cuneiform astronomical texts, is clear. Nibiru was most likely one of the Babylonian names for the planet Jupiter. This identification makes perfect sense on multiple levels. Jupiter is the largest and most visually dominant planet in our solar system, fitting for the king of the gods. In Babylonian mythology, Jupiter was unequivocally associated with Marduk. Since the Enuma Elish explicitly calls Nibiru the star of Marduk, the connection is direct. Jupiter's steady, bright presence in the sky would make it ideal for the role of celestial shepherd, the regulator of the other planets' paths. The Babylonians often gave celestial bodies different names depending on their position or the season. When Jupiter reached the celestial equator, the crossing point between the northern and southern halves of the sky, it may have been specifically referred to as Nibiru, the crossing. The word Nibiru itself, derived from the Akkadian root meaning to cross or to transition, describes a location, and an intersection point, not a planet with a unique orbit. This creates a fundamental problem for Sitchin's theory. The ancient texts he claimed to be translating do not, according to professional Assyriologists, describe what he said they described. Nibiru was not a 12th planet on an enormous elliptical orbit. It was Jupiter at the celestial crossing point. The Anunnaki were not extraterrestrials. They were the principal deities of the Mesopotamian pantheon. The creation of humanity was not a genetic engineering project, but a religious allegory explaining the human condition and our relationship to the divine. But academic dismissal, however thorough, has never been enough to kill a compelling story. And the story of Nibiru, of ancient astronauts who created humanity, has proven to be extraordinarily resilient. Part of its appeal lies in the gaps, in the things we still don't fully understand about the ancient world. How did the Sumerians achieve such sophistication so quickly? Why do flood myths appear in virtually every ancient culture? What do the megalithic structures around the world, structures that pushed ancient technologies to its absolute limits, really represent? These gaps leave room for alternative interpretations. And in the late 20th century, as UFO sightings became a cultural phenomenon, and the space age made the idea of interplanetary travel feel tangible rather than fantastical, Sitchin's ancient astronaut theory found an audience hungry for a different kind of answer to humanity's deepest questions. The theory evolved and adapted, absorbing new scientific discoveries and incorporating them into the narrative. When astronomers began seriously discussing the possibility of an undiscovered planet in the outer solar system, proponents of the Nibiru theory saw validation. When genetic engineering became a real technology rather than science fiction, it made the idea of the Anunnaki manipulating human DNA seem less impossible. When surveys of exoplanets revealed the universe to be filled with worlds beyond our own, it made the existence of an advanced extraterrestrial civilization feel not just possible, but probable. This brings us to a crucial question. Setting aside Sitchin's specific interpretations, is there any legitimate astronomical evidence for a large undiscovered planet in our solar system? The answer, surprisingly, is yes, but it's not the planet Sitchin described. For over a century and a half, astronomers have been hunting for hidden planets in the outer solar system, driven not by ancient myths but by hard observational data. The story begins with the planet Uranus, discovered in 1781 by William Herschel. As astronomers tracked Uranus's orbit, they noticed something wrong. The planet wasn't moving quite the way it should according to Newton's laws. It was being pulled by something unseen. In 1846, the French mathematician Urbain Le Verrier performed a stunning feat of mathematical astronomy. Using only the observed deviations in Uranus's orbit, he calculated the exact position where an unknown planet must be located. When astronomers pointed their telescopes to that spot, they found Neptune. It was one of the greatest triumphs in the history of science, a planet discovered not by observation, but by pure mathematics. But even after accounting for Neptune's gravitational influence, tiny anomalies remained in the orbits of both Uranus and Neptune. This led the American astronomer Percival Lowell to launch a systematic search for what he called Planet X, a world beyond Neptune that was tugging on the outer planets. Lowell died in 1916 without finding his planet, but his search continued at the observatory he founded in Flagstaff, Arizona. In 1930, young astronomer named Clyde Tombaugh, using Lowell's calculations, discovered a faint moving speck of light. It was Pluto, and for decades it was hailed as the ninth planet, the Planet X that Lowell had predicted. But there was a problem. As astronomers studied Pluto more closely, they realised it was far too small, barely larger than Earth's moon. A tiny, icy world like Pluto couldn't possibly exert enough gravitational influence to perturb the gas giants. The discovery of Pluto was a fortunate coincidence, not the answer to the orbital mysteries. The real Planet X, if it existed, was still out there. The search stalled for decades until a discovery in 1992 changed everything. Astronomers David Dewitt and Jane Liu found the first object beyond Pluto, confirming the existence of the Kuiper Belt, a vast region of icy debris extending from Neptune's orbit outward into deep space. This was a game-changer. Our solar system didn't end with Pluto. It had an entire new frontier that had barely been explored. As astronomers catalogued more and more Kuiper Belt objects, they began to notice something strange. A handful of the most distant objects, those with orbits that took them hundreds of times farther from the Sun than Earth, all seemed to have strangely similar orbital characteristics. Their orbits were clustered together, tilted at similar angles, with their closest approaches to the Sun, their perihelia, all pointing in roughly the same direction. This shouldn't happen. In a random distribution, their orbits should point every which way, like the hands of many broken clocks. The odds of this clustering occurring by chance were vanishingly small, less than 1 in 1,000. The only logical explanation was that something massive, something with powerful gravity, was shepherding these objects, keeping them aligned. The ghost in the machine had revealed itself through mathematics once again. In 2016, astronomers Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown from Caltech published a landmark paper presenting the most compelling evidence to date for a ninth major planet in our solar system. They called it Planet Nine. According to their calculations, this world would be roughly 5 to 10 times the mass of Earth, making it a super-Earth or mini-Neptune. It would orbit on a highly elongated, highly inclined path that takes it from about 200 astronomical units at its closest, well beyond the Kuiper Belt, to as far as 1,200 astronomical units at its most distant, deep into the Oort cloud. A single orbit would take this planet between 10,000 and 20,000 years to complete. For the vast majority of human history, Planet Nine, if it exists, has been impossibly far away, a faint, slow-moving speck that would be extraordinarily difficult to detect even with modern telescopes. But its gravitational signature is written in the orbits of the distant Kuiper Belt objects. Batygin and Brown's model makes specific testable predictions. It predicts that certain Kuiper Belt objects should have orbits perpendicular to the plane of the solar system. After the paper was published, astronomers discovered exactly such objects, in the locations and orientations the model predicted. The theory even offers an elegant explanation for a long-standing astronomical mystery. Why is the plane of the planet's orbits tilted about 6 degrees relative to the Sun's equator? According to the model, Planet Nine's immense gravity, acting over billions of years, has gradually torqued the entire solar system, creating the tilt we observe. This is not Sitchin's Nibiru. The orbital period is wrong. 10 to 20,000 years is very different from 3,600 years. The orbit doesn't bring Planet Nine through the inner solar system where it would be easily visible and gravitationally disruptive. Instead, it stays in the cold, dark outer reaches, never coming closer than many times the distance to Neptune. This is not a planet that periodically returns to wreak havoc. This is a distant, cold world that has likely been in its current orbit for billions of years. But the existence of Planet Nine, if confirmed, would represent something profound. It would mean that after more than a century of searching, astronomers have finally found what Percival Lowell was looking for: a massive undiscovered world in the outer solar system. The search is ongoing. New telescopes with unprecedented sensitivity are systematically scanning the sky. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile, which began operations recently, is conducting an exhaustive survey that many astronomers believe will either find Planet Nine or definitively rule out its existence within the next several years. This is where the scientific search for a hidden planet intersects with the myth of Nibiru, creating a space for speculation. Some proponents of ancient astronaut theories argue that Planet Nine is Nibiru, that Sitchin simply got the orbital period wrong, or that the orbit has changed over time due to gravitational interactions with other bodies. They point to the fact that mainstream science is now actively searching for exactly what Sitchin claimed existed, a large undiscovered planet beyond Neptune. But this conflation ignores the fundamental differences. Planet Nine, as conceived by astronomers, is a natural world, not a spacecraft carrier for an ancient civilization. Its orbit keeps it perpetually distant, not bringing it close enough to Earth for ancient humans to have observed it or been affected by it. And critically, there is no evidence whatsoever that this planet, if it exists, is or ever was inhabited. Yet the allure of the ancient astronaut narrative persists because it offers something that pure astronomy cannot. It offers meaning. It offers a story where humanity is not an accident of chemistry and natural selection, but a deliberate creation. It offers the possibility that we are not alone, that we never were alone, and that somewhere in the vast darkness of space our creators are watching, perhaps even preparing to return. This is where the Nibiru myth transcends archaeology and astronomy, and becomes something else entirely. It becomes a mirror reflecting our deepest anxieties and hopes. In an age of environmental collapse, political instability and rapid technological change, the idea of a cyclic cosmic reset, a force beyond human control that periodically wipes the slate clean and forces civilization to begin again, can feel eerily relevant. The myth of Nibiru is, in this sense, less about an actual planet and more about the fragility of human civilization and our fear that everything we've built could be swept away in an instant. The flood myths that appear in cultures around the world are often cited as evidence for Nibiru's catastrophic passages, but there is scientific evidence for ancient cataclysms that had nothing to do with a rogue planet. Around 12,800 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, the Earth experienced a period of dramatic climate upheaval, known as the Younger Dryas. Global temperatures plummeted in a matter of decades, glacial melting accelerated, and megafauna across the continents went extinct. One leading explanation for the Younger Dryas is the impact hypothesis, which proposes that Earth passed through a debris field from a fragmenting comet. Instead of a single massive impact leaving a giant crater, the planet was struck by thousands of airbursts and smaller impacts across North America, Europe, and Asia. These impacts would have ignited continent-wide wildfires. The smoke and ash would have blocked sunlight, triggering an impact winter. The heat from the explosions would have rapidly melted portions of the ice sheets covering North America, unleashing catastrophic mega-floods that poured into the oceans, disrupting ocean circulation and locking the planet into a prolonged cold period. The evidence for this event is written in a distinctive layer of sediment found at hundreds of sites around the world, dating precisely to the onset of the Younger Dryas. This layer contains high concentrations of materials associated with cosmic impacts, microscopic diamonds that can only form under extreme pressure and temperature, elevated levels of platinum group elements that are rare on Earth's surface but common in asteroids and comets, magnetic spherules, tiny beads of melted rock, and a massive spike in charcoal from the wildfires. Below this impact layer, we find abundant fossils of Ice Age megafauna. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats. Above the layer, they're gone. At the same time, the Clovis culture, which had spread across North America and hunted these great beasts, vanishes from the archaeological record. This is a real catastrophe documented in geology and supported by evidence from multiple scientific disciplines. Researchers like Randall Carlson have spent decades arguing that events like the Younger Dryas impact are the real source of flood myths. The survivors of such a catastrophe would have passed down stories of the fire that fell from the sky, the waters that drowned the world, the time when the old gods were angry and nearly destroyed everything. These stories would have been told and retold for generations, gradually transforming from eyewitness accounts into religious narratives until the original events were buried under layers of mythologization. In this framework, the Nibiru myth is not about a planet at all. It's about humanity's deep traumatic memory of the last time the sky fell. It's about the very real danger that our planet faces from cosmic bombardment. Earth moves through space in a shooting gallery. Asteroids, comets, and debris fields surround us. Most of the time, we pass through unscathed. But occasionally, very occasionally, we get hit. And when we do, civilizations can fall. This brings us to perhaps the most unsettling possibility. What if both the ancient astronaut interpretation and the mainstream archaeological interpretation are missing something? What if the myths contain a kernel of truth, but the truth is stranger and more complex than either camp imagines? There is a hypothesis, advanced by researchers like Graham Hancock and others, that human civilization is far older than we've been taught, that before the rise of Sumer and Egypt there existed an advanced civilization during the last ice age, a culture that achieved a high level of sophistication in astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and perhaps other fields we can barely imagine. This civilization was destroyed by the catastrophes of the Younger Dryas, the comet impacts and floods and century of bitter cold. But some survived, and these survivors, carrying the knowledge of the lost world, became the civilizing heroes of the post-cataclysm age. They were the wandering teachers, the culture bearers who appeared in myth as divine or semi-divine figures, bringing the arts of civilization to scattered bands of hunter-gatherers. They taught agriculture, architecture, astronomy, mathematics. They helped establish the first post-flood civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and elsewhere. And the memory of these teachers, these technological wizards from before the flood, was preserved in the myths of gods descending from the heavens to create order from chaos. In this interpretation, the Anunnaki were not aliens from another planet. They were humans from another time, survivors of a lost age whose knowledge seemed so advanced to the people of the early agricultural period that they could only be understood as gods. The ziggurat wasn't a landing platform for a spacecraft. It was an astronomical observatory built to track the movements of celestial bodies and predict future catastrophes, ensuring that humanity would never again be caught unprepared when the sky fell. This theory is controversial and speculative, but it has one advantage over Sitchin's ancient astronaut hypothesis. It doesn't require us to believe in a planet that astronomers can't find or extraterrestrials for which there's no direct evidence. It simply requires us to accept that human history might be longer and more complex than the standard timeline suggests, and that during the last ice age, when sea levels were 300 feet lower and vast coastlines that are now underwater were habitable, humans might have achieved more than we give them credit for. The problem with this theory is the lack of unambiguous archaeological evidence. Where are the cities of this lost civilization? Where are their tools, their monuments, their writing? Proponents argue that most of the evidence is underwater, submerged when sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age, or that it was destroyed in the very cataclysm that ended the civilization. They point to anomalous sites like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, a massive temple complex built by supposed hunter-gatherers 11,000 years ago, pushing back the timeline for monumental architecture by thousands of years, and challenging assumptions about the capabilities of pre-agricultural societies. But mainstream archaeology remains unconvinced. The standard explanation for the sudden flowering of civilization in places like Sumer is that it was the result of the agricultural revolution. Once humans domesticated plants and animals and established permanent settlements, population density increased, surplus food enabled specialization, and complexity snowballed. Writing, mathematics, and organized religion emerged as solutions to the challenges of managing increasingly large and complex societies. There's no need to invoke a lost precursor civilization or ancient astronauts. Human ingenuity, given the right conditions, is sufficient to explain what we see. Yet the myths persist, and they persist because they speak to something deep in the human psyche. The story of the Anunnaki, of beings who came from elsewhere to shape our world, resonates because it offers an answer to the existential loneliness of modern existence. In a universe that science tells us is vast, cold, and indifferent, the idea that someone out there cares about us, that we were made with purpose, that we are not random accidents but designed creations, is profoundly comforting even if that purpose was originally as slaves. The Nibiru myth has gone through many iterations since Sitchin first popularized it. It reached perhaps its peak cultural moment in the years leading up to December 21st, 2012, when the end of a cycle in the Mayan long count calendar was misinterpreted as a prophecy of apocalypse. The Nibiru cataclysm theory was grafted onto the 2012 phenomenon, creating a global panic about a rogue planet that was supposedly going to collide with Earth, or pass close enough to cause pole shifts, mega earthquakes, and tsunamis that would destroy civilization. NASA was forced to take the unprecedented step of publishing detailed rebuttals. Scientists explained that if a planet-sized object were on a collision course with Earth, it would have been visible to amateur astronomers for months or years before impact. It couldn't be hidden. There was no Planet X approaching. The Mayan calendar didn't predict an apocalypse, but simply the end of one cycle and the beginning of another, much like our calendar rolling over from December 31st to January 1st. When 2012 came and went without incident, the Nibiru theory didn't die, it adapted. The date was recalculated. Believers claimed that benevolent extraterrestrials had intervened to alter Nibiru's course, or that the passage had been delayed, or that the real impact would come later. The myth proved immune to falsification, which is a defining characteristic of pseudoscience. No matter how many times predictions fail, the core narrative survives by shifting dates and reinterpreting evidence. This psychological resilience is worth examining. Why do millions of people continue to believe in Nibiru despite the complete lack of physical evidence and the failure of every prediction? Part of the answer lies in the phenomenon of confirmation bias. Once someone has invested emotional energy in a belief system, contradictory evidence doesn't weaken the belief, but actually strengthens it, triggering elaborate rationalizations to explain away the contradictions. This is how conspiracy theories in general maintain their hold. But there's something deeper at work. The Nibiru myth is not really about a planet, it's about control, or rather, the lack of it. We live in a world that feels increasingly out of control. Climate change, technological disruption, political polarization, pandemic took threats. The forces shaping our lives are vast, impersonal, and terrifying in their scale. The idea of Nibiru, a cosmic force beyond human influence that periodically resets civilization, is oddly comforting because it externalizes the threat. It's not our fault. It's not the result of our choices. It's written in the stars, inevitable, and therefore in a strange way absolving us of responsibility. The Anunnaki narrative adds another layer. If we were created as slaves, if we are still under the influence or observation of a superior intelligence, then we are not alone in the universe and our struggles have cosmic significance. We matter to someone. This is a powerful antidote to the nihilism that can accompany a purely materialistic worldview. As we reach the end of this journey through myth, archaeology, astronomy and speculation, we're left with a fundamental question that cannot be answered definitively. Were the Anunnaki real? Does Nibiru exist? The honest answer is that we don't know for certain, but the weight of evidence points strongly toward the mainstream interpretation. The Anunnaki were the gods of ancient Mesopotamia, powerful metaphors for natural forces and political authority, not extraterrestrials. Nibiru was a Babylonian term for Jupiter at the celestial crossing point, not a hidden planet on a catastrophic orbit. The Sumerians were brilliant, but their brilliance was human, not a gift from off-world visitors. Their achievements in agriculture, writing, mathematics and astronomy were the products of generations of observation, experimentation and ingenuity. But this conclusion doesn't diminish the power of the story. Myths are not lies. They are truths of a different kind. The story of the Anunnaki, of beings from the sky who shaped humanity, speaks to our longing for meaning and connection. It expresses in dramatic form the very real sense that we are part of something larger than ourselves, that our existence is not accidental, that the universe has purpose even if we don't fully understand it. And while Sitchin's specific theory has been thoroughly debunked by scholars, the search for Planet Nine continues, driven not by ancient texts but by modern observations. If Planet Nine is found, it will be a triumph of scientific astronomy, another demonstration that the universe is still full of surprises, that our solar system still has secrets to reveal. But it won't be Nibiru. It will be a cold, distant world that has nothing to do with ancient myths or human origins. Perhaps the most important lesson from the entire Nibiru saga is this. We should be skeptical of anyone who claims to have all the answers, whether they're alternative historians claiming secret ancient knowledge or mainstream academics claiming absolute certainty. The past is fragmented, incomplete, open to interpretation. There is still so much we don't know about ancient civilizations, about the solar system, about the universe. We should approach these mysteries with humility, with curiosity, and with a commitment to following the evidence wherever it leads, even if it takes us to uncomfortable or unexpected places. The story of Nibiru and the Anunnaki will continue to evolve, to be retold and reinterpreted by each new generation, because it touches on questions that have no final answers. Where did we come from? Are we alone? What is our purpose? These are the questions that define us as human, and we will keep asking them, keep searching for answers as long as we exist. The ziggurat still stands in imagination, that ancient stepped pyramid reaching toward the heavens. The clay tablets still whisper their ancient secrets, waiting to be read and misread and read again. And somewhere in the cold darkness beyond Neptune, whether it's Planet Nine or something else entirely, the ghost in the machine continues to tug at distant worlds, leaving mathematical clues to its existence, daring us to find it. The search continues. The mystery endures, and perhaps that's exactly how it should be. Not every question needs an answer. Sometimes the search itself is the point, the journey more important than the destination. We are still looking up at the stars, still wondering, still hoping that somewhere in the vast cosmos, we are not alone. But there is another layer to this mystery that we must explore, a layer that connects the ancient myths to tangible geological evidence, a layer that suggests our ancestors witnessed something truly catastrophic, something that left scars not just in their collective memory, but in the very fabric of the Earth itself. Around 12,800 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, planet Earth was a very different world. Massive ice sheets, miles thick, covered much of North America and northern Europe. Sea levels were 300 feet lower than they are today, exposing vast coastal plains that are now submerged beneath the oceans. The climate was cold but stable, and large mammals roamed the continents. Mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, American lions, all thrived in the Ice Age ecosystems, and humanity was there too. Small bands of hunter-gatherers following the herds, perfecting their stone tools, surviving in a harsh but knowable world. Then, suddenly, everything changed. The change was so abrupt, so dramatic, that it registered in ice cores drilled from the Greenland ice sheet and in sediment layers across 4 continents. Within a matter of decades, perhaps even years, global temperatures plummeted. The warming trend that had been gradually melting the glaciers reversed. The northern hemisphere was plunged back into near glacial conditions. This cold snap lasted for approximately 1,200 years, a climatic anomaly so pronounced that geologists gave it a specific name. The Younger Dryas, after a small Arctic flower that suddenly began thriving again in regions where it had previously retreated. For decades, the cause of the Younger Dryas was a mystery. The leading theory involved changes in ocean circulation. As the ice sheets melted, vast quantities of fresh water poured into the North Atlantic, disrupting the thermohaline circulation, the ocean conveyor belt that transports warm water from the tropics northward. When this circulation shut down or weakened, Europe and North America froze, but this explanation, while elegant, left questions unanswered. What triggered the initial melting? What explains the other dramatic changes that occurred at exactly the same time? Then, in 2007, a team of scientists led by Richard Firestone published a controversial paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They proposed something that sounded like science fiction, that the Younger Dryas was triggered not by slow climate processes, but by a cosmic catastrophe. A fragmenting comet, they argued, had slammed into Earth's atmosphere 12,800 years ago, exploding in a series of airbursts and impacts across the northern hemisphere. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, as it came to be known, was immediately controversial. Many scientists dismissed it as pseudoscience, arguing that the evidence was contaminated, misinterpreted, or could be explained by non-cosmic processes. But the proponents of the hypothesis kept accumulating data, and with each passing year, the evidence became harder and harder to dismiss. The story is written in a thin layer of sediment found at hundreds of archaeological and geological sites across North America, Europe, Asia, and even South America. This layer, known as the Younger Dryas boundary layer, is distinctive. It's often dark, rich in charcoal and carbon, and critically it contains materials that shouldn't be there. Materials that tell a story of violence from the sky. First, there are the microspherules. These are tiny spheres of melted rock and metal, formed when material is subjected to temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius and then rapidly cooled. They are found in abundance in the boundary layer. Under microscopes, researchers have identified magnetic microspherules rich in iron and nickel, compositions consistent with meteoritic or cometary material. They've found chromium-rich microspherules that could only form from the melting of terrestrial rocks under the intense heat of an impact. And they've found glassy microspherules, droplets of melted silica that rained down from impact plumes. Then there are the nanodiamonds. These microscopic carbon crystals can only form under extreme pressure and temperature. conditions that exist during cosmic impacts or nuclear explosions. The Younger Dryas boundary layer contains concentrations of nanodiamonds, orders of magnitude higher than background levels. Multiple independent research teams have now confirmed their presence at sites across multiple continents. The platinum anomaly is perhaps even more striking. Platinum and other elements from the platinum group are extremely rare in Earth's crust but abundant in asteroids and comets. Ice cores drilled from the Greenland ice sheet show a massive spike in platinum concentration at the Younger Dryas boundary. This spike is synchronized with elevated levels of ammonium, indicating massive wildfires, and it coincides precisely with the onset of the climatic cooling. Marine sediment cores from Baffin Bay, recently analysed by Christopher Moore and his colleagues, contain the same platinum spike, along with twisted metallic particles and melt glass fragments. This was the first time Younger Dryas impact evidence had been found in ocean sediments, addressing a major criticism of the hypothesis. The black mat layer found across North America tells an even more dramatic story. This dark, organic-rich sediment layer sits directly atop the impact boundary at many sites. Below the black mat, archaeologists find the distinctive stone tools of the Clovis culture, the earliest widespread human culture in North America. Above it, the Clovis culture is gone. Below the black mat, fossils of Ice Age megafauna are abundant. Above it, they vanish. 35 genera of large mammals went extinct in North America at the Younger Dryas boundary. Mammoths, mastodons, horses, camels, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, all disappeared within a geological instant. The wildfires were unimaginable in scale. Charcoal concentrations in sediment cores from 152 sites around the Northern Hemisphere show a massive spike at the Younger Dryas onset, suggesting that a significant portion of the terrestrial biomass burned. The smoke from these fires would have filled the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and triggering an impact winter. Temperatures would have plummeted not gradually over centuries, but abruptly, within a human lifetime. How does a fragmenting comet create such devastation? The physics are well understood. When a large comet enters Earth's atmosphere, it doesn't necessarily make it to the ground intact. The immense friction and pressure can cause it to explode in mid-air, creating what's known as an airburst. The Tunguska event in Siberia in 1908 provides a modern example. An object, probably a small asteroid or comet, fragment about 60 meters across, exploded at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers. The shockwave flattened 80 million trees over more than 2,000 square kilometers. The explosion had the energy of 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, roughly 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima, and Tunguska was small compared to what happened at the Younger Dryas boundary. Computer simulations suggest that the Younger Dryas impactor wasn't a single object, but a swarm of debris from a larger comet that had fragmented during a previous pass through the inner solar system. As Earth moved through this debris stream, hundreds or thousands of objects, ranging in size from meters to kilometers across, entered the atmosphere. Some exploded high in the air, creating immense fireballs and shockwaves. Others made it closer to the surface before detonating, generating impacts powerful enough to melt rock and create the microspherules and melt glass found in the boundary layer. The largest fragments may have struck the ice sheets covering North America and Greenland, creating impacts that wouldn't leave craters because they struck ice, not bedrock, but they would have instantly melted enormous volumes of ice, contributing to catastrophic flooding. The effect on human populations would have been devastating. The Clovis people, who had spread across North America following the megafauna herds, suddenly found their world on fire. The animals they depended on were dying. The forests and grasslands that sustained those animals were burning. And in the aftermath, as the smoke cleared and the long cold set in, the survivors faced a world transformed into a frozen wasteland. Archaeological evidence shows a significant decline and reorganization in human populations in North America at this time. The Clovis culture, which had been remarkably uniform across the continent, disappears. When human populations recover and new cultures emerge, they're different, adapted to the new post-impact world. But here's where the story connects back to the myths, to the ancient memories of flood and fire. If this happened 12,800 years ago, humans witnessed it. Modern humans with brains identical to ours, capable of language, storytelling, memory. They saw the sky fill with fire, they saw the forests burn, they survived the floods as the ice melted. They endured the long cold that followed, and they passed those stories down. Researchers like Randall Carlson have spent decades documenting the geological evidence for megafloods in North America. The channeled scablands of eastern Washington state are a landscape carved by water on an almost incomprehensible scale. Enormous channels, dry cataracts hundreds of feet high, fields of massive boulders transported hundreds of miles by floods moving at highway speeds. The evidence is undeniable. Cataclysmic flooding occurred at the end of the Ice Age. Traditional geology attributed this to the failure of ice dams holding back glacial lakes. But the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis offers an additional mechanism. The heat from the impacts instantly melted portions of the ice sheets, releasing sudden, catastrophic floods. Now imagine you're a survivor of such an event. You're a hunter-gatherer living on the edge of the great ice sheets. One day the sky catches roar, objects streak across the heavens, trailing smoke and flame. When they strike, the horizon explodes. The shockwave knocks you to the ground. The heat is unbearable even from miles away. By nightfall, the world is burning. In the days and weeks that follow, the ice breaks apart. Walls of water, hundreds of feet high, pour across the landscape, drowning everything. The ash and smoke block out the sun. The cold returns, deeper and more bitter than you've ever known. Most of your people die, but some survive, and the survivors tell the story. They tell it to their children, and their children tell it to their children, and the story is told for generation after generation after generation, for 12,000 years, gradually transforming from an eyewitness account into a religious narrative. The Mesopotamian flood story, recorded in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis, describes a deluge sent by the gods to wipe out humanity. The biblical story of Noah and the Ark tells of divine judgment through water. Hindu texts speak of Manu, who survived a great flood after being warned by the god Vishnu. Greek mythology recounts how Zeus sent a flood to destroy the bronze race of humanity, with only Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha surviving. Chinese legends tell of Gun Yu and the Great Flood. The list goes on. Across 500 distinct cultures around the world, from Australia to Scandinavia to South America, there are flood myths. The mainstream explanation is that these myths arose independently in different cultures inspired by local flooding events. But the synchronicity is striking. What if they all stem from a shared root, a global catastrophe that was witnessed and remembered? The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that the catastrophic myths aren't about a rogue planet or ancient astronauts. They're about something that actually happened. A cosmic collision that nearly ended human civilization before it began. The fire from the sky, the flood that drowned the world, the long night of cold and darkness. These aren't fantasies, they're memories, distorted by time but rooted in a terrifying reality. But if this is true, if Earth was struck by a swarm of comet fragments 12,800 years ago, then we must confront an uncomfortable question. Could it happen again? The answer, according to astronomers, is yes. Earth moves through space in a cosmic shooting gallery. The solar system is filled with debris, asteroids, comets, and fragmentary material left over from the formation of the planets billions of years ago. Most of the time, we're lucky. Most of this material misses us. But occasionally, very occasionally, we get hit. The torrid meteor stream, which Earth passes through twice a year in June and November, is believed by some researchers to be the remnant of the comet that caused the Younger Dryas impacts. This stream is unusually broad and dense, containing numerous large objects. Astronomer Bill Napier has proposed that the progenitor comet, perhaps 50 to 100 kilometers across, fragmented over the past 20,000 to 30,000 years, creating the Torrid complex. Most years, Earth's passage through this stream produces nothing more than pretty meteor showers. But if we pass through a denser concentration of debris, particularly if there are larger fragments in our path, the results could be catastrophic. Since 2001, military satellites designed to detect nuclear explosions have recorded more than 20 large meteors exploding in Earth's upper atmosphere, with energies equivalent to small nuclear weapons. These were objects that were not detected by asteroid tracking programs before they arrived. They exploded too high in the atmosphere to cause damage, but each one is a reminder that we're not as safe as we'd like to believe. We're being hit by these things more often than most people realise. It's just a matter of time before we encounter something larger. This is the darker truth lurking beneath the Nibiru myth. The real threat isn't a hidden planet on a long elliptical orbit. It's the debris that fills our solar system, the fragmented remains of comets and asteroids that cross Earth's orbit unpredictably. We've been lucky for 12,000 years, but luck doesn't last forever. The ancients understood this in a way that we've forgotten. Their myths of sky gods and celestial omens weren't superstition. They were warnings based on lived experience. When the Babylonians established Nibiru as the celestial anchor point, the crossing that regulated the heavens, they were expressing a profound hope. That the cosmos could be ordered, predicted, controlled. That by understanding the movements of the heavens, they could protect themselves from the chaos that had once descended from above. The ziggurat, that massive stepped pyramid reaching toward the sky, wasn't a landing platform for extraterrestrials. It was an astronomical observatory, a place to track the movements of celestial bodies and perhaps to watch for threats. The priests who climbed those ancient steps night after night, recording the positions of planets and stars, were performing a function that modern astronomers continue today. They were trying to read the heavens, to find patterns in the chaos, to predict what was coming. And this brings us to a profound realization. The Nibiru myth, the story of the Anunnaki, the tales of cosmic catastrophe, they're all expressions of a deep human need. The need to believe that the universe makes sense, that events have causes we can understand, that if disaster comes, it will come according to a schedule, a pattern, a plan. The 3,600-year cycle of Nibiru, even if it's terrifying, is comforting in a strange way because it's predictable. If you know when the danger is coming, you can prepare. But the real universe is not so accommodating. Catastrophes don't arrive on schedule. They arrive when they arrive, without warning, without meaning. The comet that struck 12,800 years ago didn't care about humanity's plans or dreams. It wasn't sent by gods or aliens. It was simply physics, matter, moving through space and governed by gravity and inertia. We happened to be in the way. Yet even faced with this cold reality, the human imagination rebels. We want more. We want meaning. We want purpose. We want to believe that we're special, that we matter to someone or something beyond ourselves. And so we create myths. We populate the sky with gods and aliens. We imagine hidden planets and ancient astronauts. We convince ourselves that disasters happen for a reason, that there's a plan, a purpose, even if we can't quite understand it. The story of Nibiru and the Anunnaki endures not because it's true in a literal sense, but because it's true in a psychological sense. It expresses our deepest fears and our greatest hopes. Our fear of annihilation, of being wiped out by forces beyond our control, and our hope that we're not alone, that someone out there cares, that our existence has cosmic significance. Graham Hancock and other researchers have proposed an intriguing synthesis. What if the catastrophe that ended the last ice age also destroyed an advanced human civilization? A culture that had achieved sophistication in astronomy, mathematics, and engineering. The survivors of this civilization, carrying the knowledge of the lost world, came the civilizing heroes of mythology. The gods who came from the sky weren't aliens. They were humans from before the flood, from before the cataclysm, possessing knowledge that seemed miraculous to the hunter-gatherers they encountered. This theory is speculative, and mainstream archaeology has not embraced it. But it offers a middle ground between the ancient astronaut narrative and the standard archaeological timeline. It doesn't require us to believe in extraterrestrials or hidden planets. It simply suggests that human history is longer and more complex than we've been taught, and that during the Ice Age, when vast coastal regions now underwater were habitable, human cultures may have achieved more than we give them credit for. The ziggurat, the megalithic structures around the world, the sophisticated astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient monuments, these could be the remnants of that lost knowledge, preserved and passed down by the survivors of the Younger Dryas catastrophe. The myths of the Anunnaki descending from the heavens could be memories of these teachers, these culture bearers, who seemed to possess godlike wisdom, because they came from a time before the flood, before the fire, before the world was broken and remade. We may never know for certain. The evidence is fragmentary, open to interpretation. But what is certain is this. 12,800 years ago, something terrible happened. The Earth was struck by cosmic debris. Wildfires consumed continents. Megafauna went extinct. Human cultures collapsed. And the survivors were left to rebuild in a world transformed by catastrophe. The memory of that event echoes through every flood myth, every tale of fire from the sky, every story of gods who destroyed the world and remade it. The search for Nibiru, the hunt for Planet Nine, the debate over the Younger Dryas impacts, they're all part of the same larger question. What are we? Where did we come from? Are we safe? And these questions have no final answers. There are questions we'll keep asking, keep investigating as long as we exist as a species. Modern astronomy continues the work the ancient Babylonians began. We map the heavens, we track asteroids and comets, we search for hidden planets, we build bigger telescopes, launch space probes, analyse data from across the electromagnetic spectrum, and slowly, incrementally, we push back the boundaries of the unknown. The Vera Rubin Observatory in Chile, which recently began operations, is conducting the most comprehensive survey of the sky ever attempted. Within a few years, astronomers expect it will either find Planet 9 or definitively rule out its existence in the proposed orbital range. If Planet 9 is found, it will be a vindication of the scientific method, a demonstration that mathematical predictions based on gravitational observations can reveal worlds we cannot see. But it won't be Nibiru. It won't be the home of the Anunnaki. It will be a cold, dark world that has orbited in the outer solar system for billions of years. Probably a planet that formed elsewhere and was captured by the sun's gravity, or a core of a planet that never fully formed. It will tell us something profound about the history of our solar system, about planetary migration in the chaotic early years when worlds were still finding their final orbits. But it won't explain the origin of humanity or the myths of ancient Mesopotamia. Those myths will remain what they've always been. Powerful stories that express fundamental truths about the human condition. The Anunnaki, whether we interpret them as gods, as aliens, or as memories of lost ancestors, represent something essential. They represent the forces that shape our world, forces larger and more powerful than any individual human. They represent our relationship with authority, our struggle to understand why we exist and what we're meant to do. They represent the eternal human hope that someone, somewhere cares about us. And Nibiru, whether we interpret it as Jupiter, as a hypothetical Planet 9, or as a metaphor for cosmic catastrophe, represents the fundamental unpredictability of existence. It represents the awareness, buried deep in our species' memory, that everything we've built could be swept away in an instant, that we live at the mercy of forces we can barely comprehend, that the universe doesn't owe us safety or meaning or survival. But here's the remarkable thing. Despite this knowledge, despite the evidence of past catastrophes and the threat of future ones, humanity persists. We continue to build, to create, to search for meaning. We climb ziggurats and launch telescopes. We decode ancient texts and probe the outer solar system. We refuse to accept that we're insignificant, that our stories don't matter. We insist on meaning even in a universe that offers none. The Nibiru myth, in all its iterations and interpretations, is fundamentally an expression of hope disguised as apocalypse. Because even if the world ends, even if the destroyer returns, the myth promises that some will survive, that humanity will endure, that we'll rebuild, that the cycle continues. This is not nihilism, but its opposite. It's the stubborn, irrational, beautiful human conviction that we matter, that our story isn't finished, that no matter how dark the night gets, we'll see another dawn. So perhaps the real question isn't whether Nibiru exists or whether the Anunnaki were real. Perhaps the real question is what these stories tell us about ourselves. What does it mean that we create myths of cosmic catastrophe? What does it mean that we populate the heavens with beings more powerful than ourselves? What does it mean that we seek patterns in the chaos? That we build structures reaching toward the sky before, that we dedicate our lives to understanding the universe, even knowing we'll never understand all of it? It means we're human. It means we're storytellers and seekers, dreamers and survivors. It means that even faced with evidence of our own fragility, our cosmic insignificance, we refuse to give up. We keep searching, we keep questioning, we keep hoping that somewhere in the vast darkness there are answers, or at least better questions. The clay tablets still exist, preserved in museums around the world. The cuneiform script can still be read. The myths can still be interpreted and reinterpreted by each new generation. The ziggurats, or what remains of them, still stand in Iraq, silent monuments to a civilization that looked up at the stars and wondered. And we continue their work. We look up at those same stars, we wonder about the same mysteries, we tell our own versions of the same ancient stories. Whether the Anunnaki were gods or aliens or ancestors or metaphors, whether Nibiru is a planet or a prophecy or a memory of cosmic violence, the stories endure because they speak to something true and essential. They speak to our place in the universe, small and vulnerable but aware, capable of understanding, of remembering, of passing knowledge across the millennia. They speak to our relationship with forces beyond our control, whether we call them gods or gravity. They speak to our hope that we're not alone, that our existence has meaning, that someone, somewhere, is watching. And perhaps, in the end, that's enough. Not to have all the answers, but to keep asking the questions, not to decode every mystery, but to appreciate the mystery itself. Not to eliminate uncertainty, but to embrace it, to use it as fuel for curiosity and wonder. The universe is vast and strange and mostly unknown. We're a species barely out of our infancy, just beginning to understand the cosmos we inhabit. The fact that we can even ask these questions, can read ancient languages, can detect gravitational anomalies in the outer solar system, can propose and test hypotheses about events that happened 12,000 years ago, is itself a kind of miracle. The search continues, for Planet Nine, for the truth about the younger Dryas, for understanding of our deep past. The mystery endures, and perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Not every question needs an immediate answer. Sometimes the search itself is the point, the journey more important than any destination. We're still looking up at the stars, still decoding ancient texts, still wondering, still hoping. The ghost in the machine, whether it's a hidden planet or a fragment of cosmic history, or a reflection of our own deep psychology, continues to haunt us, and we continue to hunt for it, knowing that even if we find it, even if we solve this particular mystery, there will always be another mystery beyond it. The universe is fractal in its complexity, each answer revealing new questions, each discovery opening new frontiers. This is the true story of Nibiru and the Anunnaki, not a simple tale of hidden planets and ancient astronauts, but a complex multi-layered narrative about what it means to be human, about our relationship with the past, with the cosmos, with the unknown, about our capacity for wonder and our need for meaning, about our vulnerability and our resilience, about the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of a universe that often makes no sense at all. And as we close this investigation, it's worth reflecting on why this particular myth has such enduring power. In an age of scientific materialism, when we can explain so much through physics and chemistry and biology, why do millions still believe in Nibiru? Why does the idea of the Anunnaki continue to capture imaginations around the world? Part of the answer lies in the gaps that remain in our understanding. Despite our sophisticated technology and accumulated knowledge, there's still so much we don't know. The origin of consciousness, the nature of dark matter and dark energy, the possibility of life beyond Earth, the full history of human civilization. These unknowns create spaces where alternative narratives can flourish, where the imagination can run wild, unconstrained by the limitations of proven fact. But there's something deeper at work. The Nibiru myth speaks to a fundamental human longing for significance. Modern cosmology tells us we live on a small planet orbiting an average star in an unremarkable galaxy, one of hundreds of billions of galaxies in an observable universe that may itself be just one of countless universes. We're told that we're the product of random chemical reactions and blind evolutionary processes, that we have no special status, no cosmic purpose, no inherent meaning. This view, while scientifically accurate as far as we can tell, is psychologically devastating. The Anunnaki narrative offers an alternative. It tells us we were made intentionally, even if the original intention was mere utility. It tells us we're part of a larger cosmic story, connected to beings from beyond our world. It tells us that the forces shaping human history are not random but directed, that there's a pattern, a plan, even if we don't fully understand it. This is enormously appealing because it restores a sense of meaning and significance that scientific materialism strips away. Moreover, the myth taps into a deep distrust of authority that has always existed but has intensified in recent decades. Sitchin's narrative positioned mainstream academia as either too blind or too frightened to acknowledge the truth. This conspiratorial element gave believers a sense of being part of an enlightened minority, people who could see past the official story to the hidden reality beneath. In an age where institutions have repeatedly failed and betrayed public trust, this anti-establishment stance has strong appeal. The ancient astronaut theory also provides a flattering explanation for human achievement. Rather than acknowledging that ancient peoples were capable of extraordinary things through their own ingenuity and effort, the theory attributes their accomplishments to alien intervention. This simultaneously elevates ancient cultures by making them important enough to receive extraterrestrial attention, while also diminishing them by suggesting they couldn't have achieved what they did without help. It's a paradox that reveals something uncomfortable about how we view human potential and achievement. Interestingly, the Nibiru myth has evolved significantly since Sitchin first popularised it. In the age of the internet, it has merged with other conspiracy theories to create a sprawling alternative worldview. Nibiru has been linked to theories about the Illuminati, the New World Order, secret space programs, reptilian aliens, and even flat Earth cosmology. This syncretic quality, the ability to absorb and integrate new elements while maintaining a core narrative, is characteristic of successful myths. It allows the story to adapt to changing cultural contexts while preserving its essential appeal. The failed predictions don't seem to matter. When 2012 passed without incident, the theory simply adapted. When subsequent dates came and went without Nibiru's arrival, believers found explanations. The calculations were off. Benevolent aliens intervened. The government successfully deflected the planet using secret technology. This immunity to falsification is frustrating to scientists, but understandable from a psychological perspective. When someone has invested significant emotional energy in a belief system, contradictory evidence doesn't weaken the belief, but triggers elaborate rationalizations to preserve it. Yet for all its scientific problems, the Nibiru myth does point toward real possibilities that mainstream science takes seriously. The existence of undiscovered planets in our solar system is not pseudoscience. It's an active area of astronomical research. The possibility of ancient cosmic catastrophes shaping human history is supported by growing evidence. The idea that ancient cultures were more sophisticated than traditional timelines suggest is gaining traction in archaeology, and the search for extraterrestrial life, once dismissed as science fiction, is now a legitimate scientific endeavour with significant funding and resources. So perhaps the Nibiru myth, for all its errors and exaggerations, serves a useful function. It keeps us asking questions, it reminds us that our knowledge is incomplete. It pushes the boundaries of acceptable discourse. It forces scientists to explain their work more clearly and to take seriously the public's hunger for mystery and meaning. In a strange way, even myths that are factually wrong can be culturally valuable if they inspire curiosity and wonder. The danger, of course, is when myths lead to harmful actions or prevent people from dealing with real problems. If someone is so convinced of Nibiru's imminent arrival that they stop planning for the future, abandon responsibilities, or isolate themselves from society, the myth has become destructive. If the conspiracy theories associated with ancient astronauts fuel distrust to the point where people reject all expert knowledge and scientific evidence, that's a problem. The line between healthy skepticism and paranoid delusion is real, and the Nibiru phenomenon sometimes crosses it. But for many people, engaging with alternative theories like ancient astronauts and hidden planets is simply a form of intellectual recreation, a way to explore ideas outside the mainstream, to exercise the imagination, to entertain possibilities that the evidence doesn't quite support but that are fun to consider. There's nothing inherently wrong with this, as long as there's an understanding that speculation is not the same as fact, that entertaining an idea is not the same as proving it. The story of Nibiru and the Anunnaki will continue to evolve. New versions will emerge, incorporating new scientific discoveries, responding to cultural changes, adapting to technological developments. Perhaps future generations will look back at our fascination with ancient astronauts the way we look back at 19th century spiritualism or medieval alchemy, as a quaint and misguided but ultimately human attempt to make sense of the world. Or perhaps some future discovery will validate aspects of the theory that we currently dismiss. Science has been wrong before. Theories once rejected as absurd have later achieved consensus. Continental drift, meteorite impact cratering, the existence of black holes, all were initially dismissed by mainstream science. What seems certain is that as long as there are mysteries in our past and unknowns in our universe, humans will create stories to fill the gaps. We're meaning-making machines. We cannot help but see patterns, infer purposes, imagine connections. This tendency sometimes leads us astray, but it's also the source of our greatest achievements. The same impulse that creates the Nibiru myth also drives scientific inquiry, artistic creation, and philosophical speculation. We want to understand, we need to understand. And when understanding eludes us, we create narratives that provide the sense of understanding, even if they are not quite true. The ancient Sumerians looked up at the night sky and saw gods. They created elaborate myths to explain the movements of celestial bodies and the patterns of the seasons. Their astronomy was intimately connected with their religion, their science inseparable from their spirituality. We might think we're different, that we've transcended that primitive confusion, but have we really? We still look up at the sky and see what we want to see. We project our fears and hopes onto the cosmos. We create stories about hidden planets and ancient visitors because those stories fulfill needs that pure science cannot satisfy. The truth is, we don't know everything. We don't know how life began on Earth. We don't know if we're alone in the universe. We don't know the full history of human civilization. We don't know all the planets in our own solar system. We don't know what dark matter is, or what causes consciousness. These are not trivial gaps. They're fundamental mysteries at the heart of existence. And in the face of such profound unknowing, it's understandable that people reach for explanations that feel satisfying even if they can't be proven. The scientific method is our best tool for understanding reality, but it's a slow, painstaking process. It requires patience, rigor, and a willingness to accept uncertainty. Myths, by contrast, offer immediate certainty, complete narratives, emotionally satisfying conclusions. They short-circuit the difficult work of real investigation. But they also serve a purpose that science often neglects. They speak to the heart as well as the mind. They provide not just facts but meaning. Perhaps the lesson of the Nibiru saga is that we need both. We need the rigorous skepticism and evidence-based reasoning of science. And we need the imaginative speculation and meaning-making of myth. The key is not letting one completely dominate the other, not mistaking myth for science or dismissing science as myth. It's maintaining a creative tension between the two, using science to constrain our myths, and using myth to inspire our science. The Sumerians built ziggurats and invented astronomy. They created gods and developed mathematics. They told stories about the Anunnaki and tracked the movements of Jupiter, which they called Nibiru, the crossing. They were doing both things simultaneously, using both modes of understanding, recognizing that both had value. Perhaps we can learn from their example. Perhaps we can honour the myths while pursuing the truth. Perhaps we can wonder about ancient astronauts while seriously investigating ancient civilizations. Perhaps we can imagine hidden planets while systematically searching the sky. The universe is vast and strange and mostly unknown. We've barely begun to explore it. The fact that we're here at all, conscious beings capable of pondering our own origins and speculating about cosmic catastrophes, is itself the greatest mystery. Whether we were created by gods or aliens or natural selection, whether our planet has been visited or will be visited by the beings from beyond, whether there's a hidden world waiting to be discovered at the edge of our solar system, the simple fact of our existence, our awareness, our curiosity, is remarkable beyond words. So let the myths proliferate. Let people wonder and speculate and imagine. Let them tell stories about Nibiru and the Anunnaki and ancient wisdom and cosmic catastrophes. As long as we also continue the hard work of actual investigation, as long as we're honest about the difference between evidence and speculation, as long as we remain open to wonder while committed to truth, these myths can coexist with science. They can inspire us to ask better questions, to look more carefully, to think more deeply about who we are and where we came from. The ziggurat still stands in imagination, that ancient pyramid reaching toward the heavens, a monument to the human need to understand, to connect, to transcend. The stars still shine overhead, as mysterious now in some ways as they were to the Sumerians 6,000 years ago, and we continue the search armed with better tools but driven by the same fundamental curiosity, the same longing for meaning, the same desperate hope that we might understand, that we might matter, that we might not be alone. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of humanity's most enduring mysteries. If you've enjoyed this exploration of the Nibiru myth, the Anunnaki legends, the scientific search for hidden planets, and the real cosmic catastrophes that have shaped our world, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment letting me know what you think. Are the myths based on real events? Is there a Planet Nine waiting to be discovered? What do these ancient stories tell us about ourselves? And check out our other videos for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, and keep looking up at the stars.